For 1,000 years, kings and queens of Europe had absolute power. But absolute power corrupts absolutely. Greed, revenge, sex, madness, witchcraft, murder. Every monarch had their royal secrets. Because monarchs claimed God empowered them to rule, those who wanted to control a royal sometimes turned to an equal power, the devil. French King Louis XIV's mistress used black magic to hold him and kill her rivals. Austrian Emperor Rudolf II was driven mad by magicians and alchemists. And the English boy king Henry VI was bewitched by his aunt. These kings fell under the dark spell of sorcery. Belief in witchcraft was common in the Middle Ages. Witches, sprites, and demons flew through the night, bringing misfortune, sickness, and death. In 15th century London, reports circulated that witches were using black magic to threaten the reign of King Henry VI, a sickly child who had a wobbly hold on power. The London Chronicle recorded,
"It was spoken amongst the people that there were some wicked fiends and spirits are reared out of hell to put the people to trouble, dissension, and unrest. Certain men and women called witches made their craft to destroy the king, whom God save and keep."
Indeed, Dame Eleanor of Gloucester, King Henry's aunt, had secretly used spells and potions in the past to steal her husband from his previous wife. Eleanor had a fierce ambition to make her husband king and herself queen. If the boy king Henry died without children, the way would be clear to the crown. Eleanor's accomplices in this plot were Roger Bolingbroke and Robert Southwell, both well-known sorcerers. At satanic altars, they used human blood, baby bones, and potions for spells to destroy the king. On the 15th of July 1441, a vicious storm struck England, threatening Henry's life as he travelled to London. The king's allies called it the work of witches and used the event as a pretext to come after Henry's aunt Eleanor. Loyalists from Henry's court found Bolingbroke and Southwell in their coven and arrested them, but Eleanor avoided arrest by escaping through a concealed door. After gruesome torture, Bolingbroke admitted Eleanor instigated the plot against the king. A warrant was issued for Eleanor's arrest, charging the king's aunt with witchcraft, sorcery, heresy, and treason. Eleanor took sanctuary at Westminster Abbey, but knowing she would eventually have to face her accusers, the king's aunt agreed to appear in court. She denied all the charges. But when Bolingbroke gave damning evidence against her, she changed her plea. The king's aunt, the most powerful woman in the kingdom, confessed to using evil powers against her sovereign. The trial was a sensation. No member of the royal family had ever admitted to witchcraft. Eleanor's accomplices were condemned to death, but because the king's aunt was a royal, she could not be executed. Her punishment was laid down in the official newspaper of the day, the London Chronicle.
So she was sentenced to do penance. She did walk barefoot on several days to the churches of the city bearing tapers, where all could see her and her shame, and know her to be a witch.
Thomas Southwell escaped a hideous death by dying in his sleep here in the Tower of London the day before his execution. Bolingbroke was not so lucky. He was taken from the tower, hanged, and then let down half alive. His bowels were ripped out and burned in front of him. His head was cut off and jammed on a pike on London Bridge. The rest of his body was chopped up and sent to 4 different towns across England. It was an effective warning not to make magic against the king. Eleanor was confined to a castle, and since her nephew the king still feared her witchcraft, she was moved further away from London each year. The night she died, another terrible storm lashed London. While Henry VI was the victim of black magic, 100 years later, Rudolf II of Austria tried to use witchcraft to his own ends. It would cost him his sanity.
I know that I am dead and damned. I am a man possessed by the devil.
Ruler of Bohemia and Holy Roman Emperor, Rudolf II was convinced he was cursed. Inheriting mental instability from his great-grandmother Joanna the Mad, he suffered his first mental breakdown at 26. Rudolf came to power in Bohemia in the second half of the 16th century, a superstitious age when people feared the end of the world was nigh. When court astrologers predicted Rudolf would die before he was 50, the king became obsessed with imaginary demons and the mysteries of the dark side. Paranoid, Rudolf turned to magic to save himself. He set up an alchemical laboratory here in Prague, in the most secure area of his castle, a tower where gunpowder was stored. Magical animals, astrological instruments, potions, secret codes, and mystical alchemical symbols surrounded him. His ministers complained he had lost all interest in the affairs of state. One noted that
His Majesty is interested only in wizards, alchemists, Kabbalists, and the like, sparing no expense to find all kinds of treasures, learn secrets, and use scandalous ways of harming his enemies. He strives all the time to eliminate God completely, so that he may in future serve a different master.
Rudolf's obsessions attracted both genuine scientists and a host of charlatans, fakers, and con men. The first miracle workers to seek their fortune at Rudolf's court were an English team called Dee and Kelly. Edward Kelly was a shadowy figure who already had both his ears cut off in England for fraud. Kelly suggested,
"First thou shalt write unto Rudolph, as I shall inspire thee. Then thou shalt go unto him, saying that the angel of the Lord hath appeared unto thee. Tell him he is possessed with a great and a mighty devil."
But Kelly's partner, Dr. John Dee, was a sincere believer in the occult. He had been court astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I of England, but was forced to flee when the public suspected him of witchcraft and burnt his house down.
Saying that the angel of the Lord
Dee and Kelly promised Rudolph the answer to all his problems, the secret of the Philosopher's Stone, a mysterious formula combining mercury, sulfur, and salt. The stone was said to have many powers, from changing base metals into gold to granting eternal life. If Rudolph possessed it, he believed he could control the devil himself. Dr. Dee labored night and day in his quest for the stone.
Mighty is the God of hosts. Amongst his people might we work your power. Pour down on us the fires of life. Move, descend, and apply yourselves unto us, the partakers of this secret wisdom in your creation.
But when Dee's experiments came to nothing, the furious King Rudolf reacted by expelling him from the country. Dr. Dee blamed his failures on evil demons conjured by Kelly, but Kelly also failed to produce the magical Philosopher's Stone. Again, Rudolf's disappointment turned to rage, and he had Kelly locked up in the Powder Tower. There, Kelly fell to his death trying to escape from his guards. News of King Rudolph's tinkering with black magic had alarmed the Catholic Church. The Pope insisted the king undergo an exorcism, but Rudolph refused. The paranoid king came to see the church as a feared enemy and refused to observe holy rituals. Though King Rudolph carried the title Holy Roman Emperor, he stood damned by the Church of Rome. But rather than repent, Rudolph descended deeper into the occult. As his fateful 50th birthday approached, Rudolph employed a sorcerer who claimed he could speak to the devil. Rudolph's wizard taught him to desecrate dead bodies to increase his black powers. The king even ordered moss to be gathered from the skulls of hanged men. Rudolph's mental condition deteriorated, and he had another nervous breakdown. But he didn't fulfill his astrologer's old prophecies by dying. He became even more reclusive, locked in his laboratory and surrounded by his collection of occult texts and specimens. Ambassadors to the court didn't see him for 2 years, as rumors circulated the king was actually dead. Turning to his court artists, Rudolph commissioned bizarre images of himself, as a golden sprite held up by the goddess of charity, and his own likeness made from fruit and vegetables. Rudolph's obsessions turned to his brother Matthias. He became convinced Matthias had filled his palace with spies and was plotting his downfall. Fearful, Rudolph decided to take revenge on his brother. The king found a death curse in an ancient book of spells and summoned yet another famous wizard, Dr. von Erbach, to help. The wizard brought Rudolph to an obscure grotto on the edge of Prague to launch the death curse. There, Dr. von Erbach conjured his magic with an Egyptian mummy and the sacrifice of a black cat. The curse failed, but the séance was so disturbing it drove Rudolph deeper into madness. Yet again, magic failed to save the disturbed king. Instead, dabbling in the black arts broke the unstable Rudolph. After his brother Matthias declared Rudolph unfit to rule, he rarely ventured outside his castle again. Rudolph II died irretrievably insane. His collection of bizarre treasures, valued at 17 million gold pieces, gradually evaporated. But as these symbols attest, his magical influence left its mark all over his capital city of Prague. With the rise of science at the end of the 17th century, witchcraft had disappeared, or so people thought. Then a sex and sorcery scandal exploded at the French court of King Louis XIV. For nearly 30 years during the king's reign, secret records of the scandal were kept locked in a simple black case. This was the report by Parisian Chief of Police Nicolas de la Reynie, describing a black magic conspiracy that reached into the darkest depths of human depravity. La La Reynie was personally ordered by the king to erase his investigation from the public record for fear the enormity of the scandal might stain Louis's reputation as the glorious Sun King of France. The late 1600s were France's golden age, when King Louis built the Palace of Versailles, where the arts, sciences, and sexual escapades flourished. There was even an official position for the royal concubine, known as maîtresse en titre. It was held for a time by a certain Madame de Montespan. The scandal unraveled when an anonymous tip about a plot to poison the king led Chief of Police La Reynie to investigate. The policeman quickly discovered not just one plot, but a series of poisonings in the court. This woman, the Comtesse de Soissons, one of the king's lovers, was suspected of having poisoned her husband. Other noble women were also suspected of poisoning their spouses. When the noble women fled together, their guilt was apparent. To investigate the growing scandal, La Reynie was ordered to reinstate a special court, the Chambre Ardente, or burning chamber. It was convened in secrecy in a room draped in black and lit by candles. Originating in the Middle Ages, the court investigated cases of poisoning and sorcery and reported directly to the king. It had not met for over 100 years. Police Chief La Reynie observed,
"It appeared that human life was up for sale. That poison was the only solution to a family's problems in this city."
La Reynie's investigation led him to the quiet suburban home of a fortune teller known as La Voisin. It turned out to be the lair of the greatest witch in Paris, and poisonings were the least of her endeavors. La Voisin's clients told of 10,000 babies aborted by the midnight hags, of sessions spent summoning up the devil, of objects flying around the house. When La Reynie raided the place, he found more than 50 varieties of poison, a hidden furnace containing bone fragments from unwanted infants too large to bury, wax figurines stuck full of pins, black tapers and incense, priests' robes, love potions, and satanic books. When the police chief questioned her, the witch admitted her crimes.
"Nothing is impossible to me. Only another god can understand my powers."
Most importantly, she asserted that many noble ladies were among her clients. The chief realized that he'd discovered a new and more sinister form of the old black magic. La Voisin, aided by one of her lovers, a defrocked priest, had combined the ancient techniques of witchcraft with a mockery of the Catholic Mass. The witch ran the Mass backwards and included nudity. Most chillingly, she added human sacrifice. Another of La Voisin's lovers, the Paris executioner, supplied her with human fat to make black candles. She called her new rite the Black Mass. But what really shook the police chief was his discovery of La Voisin's client list. Heading it was the king's official mistress, Madame de Montespan. La Reynie knew he had to tell the king. The news shocked Louis XIV. Afraid the story might leak out and tarnish his golden reputation, the Sun King ordered the trials suspended. Confidentially, he told La Reynie to continue in secret and find out if Madame de Montespan was using black magic against him. She was. Madame de Montespan, paragon of French beauty and mother of the king's most favored children, had been a regular client of La Voisin's for years. Her near-naked body served as an altar while La Voisin and the priest performed the Black Mass ritual by the light of the witch's evil black candles. They sacrificed a human baby and drank its blood from a satanic chalice, while the priest chanted spells aimed at removing Montespan's enemies from the court. Sometimes she herself joined in.
Astaroth, Asmodeus, princes of friendship, accept the sacrifice of this baby which I present to you in return for these wishes. That the king should love me and make our son the future king of France. That I shall be honored by the princes and princesses of the court, and that nothing that I ask of the king shall be denied me.
Not content with magical spells alone, the mistress had been spicing the Sun King's food with powdered bat's blood, testicles of cockerels, ground beetles, goat sperm, dried human fetuses, and toad's venom. The potions were aimed at keeping him faithful and oblivious to her rivals. When the king took another lover, Montespan used death-inducing magic spells and poison against her. The young woman died. Confronted with the enormity of the contagion in his court, Louis XIV moved quickly to suppress the scandal. He ordered the witch La Voisin burnt to death. The king also stopped the trial and set the accused free, warning his courtiers never to speak of it again. Taking action against any of his nobles would risk exposing the entire scandal. Police Chief La Reynie called it a travesty of justice and noted wisely that the very enormity of their crimes proved their safeguard. Madame de Montespan was discreetly removed from court and became piously religious in her old age. The incriminating evidence was locked in a black leather case, and 28 years later, King Louis XIV had it all burned in his presence. With the evidence gone, Louis now felt sure his name would remain unsoiled by the scandal. But the king didn't realize that Police Chief La Reynie had kept his own records of the events in private diaries. Though the diaries lay unstudied for 2 centuries, their recent discovery has cast a deep shadow over the reign of the glorious Sun King of France. The dark side was a force so powerful even royalty could never ignore it. It haunted King Louis XIV of France from beyond the grave, drove Rudolph II of Bohemia insane, and terrorized the boy king Henry VI of England.